Good afternoon. I'm Jacob Kersey with news headlines from the Washington Watch news desk. The House is back today and is facing a busy schedule as lawmakers consider appropriations bills for the Department of Homeland Security, the State Department, and the Department of Defense. Speaker Mike Johnson is hoping to lead his slim GOP majority to accomplish something that hasn't been done since 1997. And that is, approve all 12 annual funding bills before the new fiscal year. Republican lawmakers have expressed their desire to pass fiscally responsible, conservative appropriations bills.
We got to get serious about slashing this government. The amount of spending that we are going to do, the new estimates are deficits are going to be $1.9 trillion. That's insanity. We cannot continue to borrow money at that clip, because what happens to real America is their purchasing power continues to be destroyed by inflation while government just goes on these binge spending sprees. Enough is enough.
That was Republican Congressman Byron Donalds late last week. But slashing government spending is going to be no easy task. Just yesterday, the White House released statements threatening to veto the House Republican spending bills. Yet the likelihood of the House bills making it to President Biden's desk is quite low, especially given the fact that the legislation would first have to be approved by the Democrat-controlled Senate. In other news, it's primary day in Colorado, Utah, and New York, while special primary runoffs are occurring in South Carolina. Voters in Colorado will be deciding who will replace Republican Representative Ken Buck, who left his congressional seat in early March. In Utah, in addition to a few House races, voters will decide who will replace Senator Mitt Romney, who is retiring from Congress. And in New York, alarms are going off in Democrat Representative Jamal Bowman's race. Bowman, who, if you remember, is the congressional member who pulled a fire alarm in a Capitol office building, is facing a tough challenge from his Democrat opponent, George Latimer. Now, Latimer is backed by a pro-Israel group who is upset with Bowman's support of pro-Palestinian protests. In international news, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's Liberal Party suffered a surprising defeat in a special election that was held yesterday. Results revealed this morning that a Liberal Party seat, long considered to be safe, was lost to Conservatives. Now, this loss comes not long after a series of losses by European Liberals earlier this month, including French President Emmanuel Macron's left-wing party. And while we can't say with certainty what will happen in America's November elections, there appears to be a pattern of rejecting liberal administrations forming in the West. And finally, more than 100 victims of Hamas's terrorist attack on Israel last October are suing a controversial United Nations agency. The UN Relief and Works Agency, commonly called UNRWA, has for quite some time been accused of being complicit in Hamas's attack on Israel. Israeli officials claim that at least 19 UNRWA staff members took part in the October terrorist attack. The lawsuit filed yesterday accuses UNRWA of money laundering that helps Hamas. A lead lawyer in the suit, Bijan Amini, said, "The findings in this lawsuit demonstrate that UNRWA was aware of and actively participated in the diversion of funds earmarked to support the people of Gaza into channels that ensure those funds were used for terrorism and in violation of international law." When asked by a reporter about the lawsuit, UNRWA chief Philippe Lazzarini had this to say.
"I learned it through the media. I have not received any notification. I don't know what the status of this lawsuit is all about, but for the time being, I see this as an additional way to put pressure on the agency.
In addition to accusations of money laundering, the lawsuit also accuses UNRWA of having the vast majority of its employee union leadership controlled by Hamas, and mentions Israel's accusations of the staff participation in the terrorist attack. And those are today's headlines. Once again, I'm Jacob Kersey. For more news and commentary, be sure to check out the Washington Stand at WashingtonStand.com and follow us on social media for updates at FRC DC. Up next is Washington Watch with Tony Perkins. We'll see you tomorrow with more news.
From the heart of our nation's capital in Washington, D.C., bringing compelling interviews, insightful analysis, taking you beyond the headlines and sound bites into conversations with our nation's leaders and newsmakers, all from a biblical worldview. Washington Watch with Tony Perkins starts now.
MAGA Republicans' row is just the beginning. They're going to try to ban the right to choose nationwide. They're coming for IVF and birth control next. We're up against extremism. Send me back to the White House and I'll fight like to restore Roe v. Wade and protect American freedom.
That was President Joe Biden promoting abortion on the second anniversary of the Dobbs decision. Both President Biden and Vice President Harris are making clear what their priority for the future is: ending unborn human lives. I'm Tony Perkins, and this is Washington Watch. What is frustrating their plans at present is the narrowly controlled Republican House. As the Republicans craft appropriations bills for the next year, they are once again communicating a distinction between the priorities of the two major parties. Alabama Congressman Robert Aderholt, one of the leaders of the House Appropriations Committee, will join me in just a moment. The Supreme Court yesterday agreed to hear the Biden administration's challenge to the Tennessee SAFE Act, which protects minors from gender mutilation surgeries and experimental drugs. Now, Tennessee prevailed at the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals, so the administration is hoping to stop Tennessee and potentially 24 other states that are protecting minors from the scalpel of transgender ideologues. We'll talk with Tennessee State Representative Jason Zachary, one of the law's sponsors, later on this edition of Washington Watch. Former President Donald Trump spoke at the Faith and Freedom Coalition's annual Road to the Majority Conference over the weekend.
The reason the radical left will always come after religious believers is simple, because they know that our allegiance is not to them. Our allegiance is not to them. Our allegiance is to our country, and our allegiance is to our Creator.
That was President Trump speaking at the rally. My friend Ralph Reed, founder and chairman of the Faith and Freedom Coalition, will join us later. And presidential debates are high stakes. They can make or break a campaign. We're going to talk with Brett O'Donnell, former debate coach at Liberty University, who has since coached a number of presidential candidates. He's going to join us to discuss what a good night for President Trump will look like and how he can get there. You don't want to miss that conversation. Well, as we've talked about, as you see every day, biblical truth is under attack in our culture and in this country, and we must defend the Christian faith. If not us, who? And right now, you can take advantage of FRC's $2.5 million challenge match and have twice the impact when you give before the end of the week, June 30th. To join us in defending the faith, simply text the word DEFEND to 67742, or we have Defending the Faith team members standing by to take your phone call. That's right, they'll take your call. 800-225-4008. That's 800-225-4008 to stand with us as we defend the faith in America. The House of Representatives will consider a trio of government funding bills for 2025 this week as they weigh in on measures for funding the Departments of Homeland Security, Department of State, and Defense and Foreign Operations. Now, President Biden has already threatened to veto the measures. In a statement of administration policy yesterday, the president took aim at the conservative policy provisions that Republicans have included in the appropriations measures. Joining me now to discuss this is Congressman Robert Aderholt, who serves on the House Appropriations Committee. He represents the 4th Congressional District of Alabama. Congressman Aderholt, welcome back to the program.
Tony, always good to be on Washington Watch and good to be with you, and thanks for having me on.
Well, it's good to see you. I'm glad you made it into D.C. last night. We crossed paths in the airport there in Atlanta, and you got in earlier than I did, but we're both here. So let's talk about the appropriations bills that were set to go before the Rules Committee earlier this afternoon that the House is to take up this week. Give us the latest.
Well, there's 3 appropriation bills that you referred to a little bit earlier, and really they deal with our national security. The defense appropriation bill will be brought up, is scheduled to be brought up this week, as well as the Homeland Security appropriations bill, and then the foreign operations appropriation bill. Now, the foreign operation actually deals with how we deal with other countries, with foreign governments. A prime example of that is how we're helping Israel. And in the legislation, we're again supporting Israel to make sure that we do everything we can to stand by an ally that's been with us for such a long time. I think the amount that we're planning to put in this bill for Israel alone will be about $3.3 billion. But overall, the legislation is the funding mechanism for really national security, homeland security, and our foreign operation as we through the Department of State. Now, one thing that I do want to mention that is in these appropriation bills that I want to really give a lot of credit to the Speaker and to the Republican leadership is that they have required, and obviously there's many of us who are so glad to see that, is that we have got pro-family and pro-life riders that are in this legislation. Just to give an example of some of the things that we're including in here is like in, for example, the Defense Appropriation Bill prohibits paid leave and travel or related expenses of a federal employee or their dependents to obtain an abortion or an abortion-related service. Also protects against religious discrimination, and it prohibits the recruiting, the hiring, or promotion of any person who's been convicted or charged anything related to child pornography or sexual misconduct. So the Republicans want to put those riders in there to make sure that the money that we send to the Department of Defense or we send to Homeland Security is going to make sure that we have pro-family policies that are in there, or the money can't be spent.
And I failed to mention in your introduction, you were also the chairman of the Values Action Team in the House, and so many of those riders there are a part of your work in advancing the values on Capitol Hill. So is that the reason that the administration, President Biden, announcing yesterday that if these three bills were to make their way through Congress, he would veto them?
Well, obviously, this is a big part of it. I mean, he also disagrees with the funding amounts, but obviously he does not want to see the amount that we're spending on defense. Probably would like to see more money spending on foreign governments. Obviously, we have to work with foreign governments, just like Israel and a lot of our friends and allies. We want to make sure that we do everything we can to help make sure that they are in good positions around the world, especially those that embrace democracy. But obviously, these pro-life riders, pro-family riders that are included in here is a big thing of why the Democrats won't be voting for these bills. And the president has said he will veto them. We will actually have to fight with this when we get with the Senate. The Senate will probably pass these bills. And then, as you know, Chuck Schumer is in charge of the Senate. These riders will not be included. These pro-life, pro-family riders will not be included over there. So when we go to conference, we'll have to fight for them just like we do every year. And it's always uphill battle. I don't want to paint this as a rosy picture, because so many times the Democrats will have a stronger hand, especially with Biden in the White House. So it's going to be a battle, but we're going to fight and do everything we can to keep them in there if we go to conference.
Well, and you fought to the end in this last year's appropriation, refusing to support the appropriations bills without these riders. And you know, being a leader in the Appropriations Committee, that's a pretty bold stand. Talk for a moment. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, a lot of my colleagues on the Appropriations Committee and everything was probably not too happy, but there were some things in that appropriation bill, not only the riders that were stripped out, but also the earmarks that were included. And I, was just very disconcerting, and I had to vote no. And but I'm always trying to vote yes on these legislation because I want them to be pro-family and pro-life.
We need some help. We need some help in the Senate to have the same approach in the Senate, and then maybe we can get this, onto the president's desk, a good president, and we can actually see it come into law. Talk about the funding for the Homeland Security and the resistance from Democrats. What's going on there?
Well, obviously, Homeland Security deals with the border, and we are actually doing a lot to try to increase funding for the border. Ultimately, as you know, the president really controls, at the end of the day, what happens on the border. And that's why it's so important that we get somebody else in the White House like Donald Trump who's going to make this priority. But there are $600 million that is included for the construction of the southern border wall. As you know, Trump was very supportive of that, but the Biden administration has not been. but we want to include $600 million. I know that's not going to build the entire wall, but at least we're working toward that. And I think that's something that most Americans support. Also, it sustains funding for 22,000 Border Patrol agents and actually funds 50,000 detention beds, which I'm almost certain that is the most that has ever previously been appropriated. So there's a lot of good things in these appropriation bills. Appropriation bills are never perfect, but obviously you have to go through the process and work with the other side. But what we want to do is make it the best appropriation bills possible as we move forward.
Congressman Aderholt, I know you have to go. You got another commitment. Very quickly, final question. If the House is able to pass this legislation, these 3 appropriations bills followed by others, does that put the House and the Republicans in a stronger position in the negotiations with the Senate?
Oh, no question. I mean, we come to the table united. That does help. And obviously, it helps Mike Johnson, who I know is a mutual friend of both of us, so that when he goes and ultimately, at the end of the day, when he meets with Leader Schumer and they try to hash these out, knowing that he's got the backing of the House majority, makes all the difference.
Congressman Robert Aderholt, thanks so much for taking time to join us this evening. Always great to have you on the program.
Thanks, Tony. Always good to be with you, and we'll be in touch.
All right. Congressman Robert Aderholt of Alabama. As I mentioned, he's the Values Action Team chairman. That is a team that actually came together about 25 years ago. It was something that FRC was helpful in formulating, putting together members of Congress who care about these issues, faith, family, and freedom, and they're working hard. And it's a growing caucus on the Hill. So anyway, Robert is leading that, doing a very good job. By the way, I want to thank, speaking of family, I want to thank Jody Heiss for filling in for me Friday and yesterday. I had the opportunity to visit my son and daughter-in-law and see our new granddaughter in Georgia, so we had a good time the weekend. I also had a chance to preach at North Hall Church in Gainesville, where my good friend Bucky Kennedy is doing a fantastic job as the senior pastor there in Georgia. I'm going to talk more about this in the days ahead, but I want to give you a heads up. The Republican Party platform is under assault. When we talk about values, faith, family, and freedom, we talk about life, we talk about family, we talk about all this gender stuff. We've got a really strong party platform, but there are those who want to change it. And that's going to be coming up here in just a few weeks in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And I need your help. I'm going to be on the platform committee along with some other good friends. But there is an all-out effort to change what the party believes. I hate to tell you this, but it's true. So I need you to text LIFE to 67742, LIFE to 67742. I'll give you a link. You can sign up because I'm going to need your help come July 8th and 9th. It's critical. It's critical to keep at least one party in this country that is aligned with biblical truth. Can't do it alone. I need your help. Text LIFE to 67742. All right, don't go away. We're going to come back with more Washington Watch. The Biden administration challenging a Tennessee law that protects children from gender mutilation surgeries and experimental drugs. We're going to talk with one of the sponsors of the law next.
Download the new Stand Firm app for Apple and Android phones today and join a wonderful community of fellow believers. We've created a special place for you to access news from a biblical perspective, read and listen to daily devotionals, pray for current events, and more. Share the Stand Firm app with your friends, family, and church members, and stand firm everywhere you go.
Hello, I'm Jody Heiss, president of FRC Action. Here in America, we thank God for the right to vote, and we can all agree on the importance of this upcoming election. Many of us want to support candidates who share our values, but we're not comfortable supporting the big national political organizations. Well, we have a solution for supporting candidates through FRC Action's Faith, Family, and Freedom Fund. Being a super PAC, it allows for unlimited individual and corporate donations, so we can endorse and fund campaigns for people who share our values. By giving to this fund, we're able to pull all of our contributions together and support and endorse like-minded candidates. That's how we move the needle. So let's be the best stewards possible and get the most out of our political contributions by uniting our efforts. For more information or to contribute, visit faithfamilyfreedomfund.org. Thank you so much, and God bless you.
All of us are born with the desire to find truth and meaning. Where did I come from? What happens when I die? While our answers to these questions may divide us, we are united in our need for the freedom to answer life's biggest questions and make life's biggest decisions for ourselves. That's why religious freedom matters for everyone. Religious freedom matters because the powerful have long wanted to control those who are less powerful. Religious freedom matters because the freedom of those who are different is often threatened by those who believe different is dangerous. At the Center for Religious Liberty at Family Research Council, we promote religious freedom for everyone because the only alternative is religious freedom for no one. We encourage Americans and the American government to engage and advocate for the persecuted, and they do. We work every day to bring good news to the afflicted, to proclaim liberty to captives and freedom to prisoners. We do it because that's what Jesus does. We work to give freedom to others because we ourselves have been set free.
Welcome back to Washington Watch. Let me remind you, we've got our Defending the Faith team members standing by to take your phone call. If you'd like to partner with us as we come to the end of our fiscal year, your gift will be doubled because of a challenge match that was given by some generous supporters of Family Research Council. So they're standing by right now to take your phone call. 800-225-4008. That's 800-225-4008 to talk to one of our Defending the Faith team members. Well, yesterday the U.S. Supreme Court agreed to hear a challenge to Tennessee's law passed last year that protects minors from gender mutilation surgeries and experimental drugs. Now, this comes after the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Sixth Circuit struck down a preliminary injunction against the law, causing the Biden administration to appeal the decision to the U.S. Supreme Court. Now, could this be the case that sets the precedent for the constitutionality of the SAFE Act bills protecting children in states throughout the country? Now, as we've talked about, since we were a part of introducing the first bill in Arkansas a few years back, we now have 25 states that have these laws, common sense laws, protecting children. I mean, children, we don't trust them to drive. We don't trust them to get a tattoo. We don't trust them to vote until they're over 18, but yet we'll allow them to make a decision that will alter their bodies for life. Joining me now to discuss this is Tennessee State Representative Jason Zachary, who was a co-sponsor of this bill. He represents the 14th District of Tennessee. Representative Zachary, welcome to Washington Watch. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Tony.
So we've seen similar SAFE Acts, as I mentioned, passed throughout the country, over half the states. Describe the process that it took to pass this legislation in your state and why your state has been challenged.
Sure. So in Tennessee, we have a supermajority, a Republican supermajority, and we have made protecting children a priority, Tony. And it goes back to my first term when I was first elected in 2016, where we began to take steps to protect life, 48 hours, 20 weeks, admitting privileges. Then we took the step with the heartbeat bill. And then in 2019, we passed the Human Life Protection Act, which is the strongest pro-life piece of legislation in the country, where we have effectively eliminated abortions in Tennessee, all elective abortions. And so, again, it's been a priority in Tennessee. And as this social contagion of gender dysphoria has swept across the country over the last couple of years, when I was first elected, this wasn't even a major issue. And it has become an issue over the last 4 or 5 years. as this began to sweep across the nation, we looked at it and we took the steps of protecting the integrity of girls' restrooms, protecting the integrity of high school and collegiate sports. And the next step was to protect minors. Again, as you said, it's common sense. We took the steps to protect children from irreversible procedures, gender mutilation procedures, and also these harmful drugs that they take that keep them from having children, to completely alter their voice, completely change the dynamics and the genetics of the child. And again, we're talking about children. And so, as you mentioned, it's the same line I always use. We don't allow a child to get a tattoo until they turn 18. We don't allow them to carry a gun. Numerous things they can't even buy Sudafed, my goodness, until they're 16. But yet, the left wants you to think that they're qualified to be able to make these terrible gender decisions, these life-altering decisions. And so our majority leader picked up the mantle, our majority leader in the House and the Senate. They really worked with our caucuses in both chambers to make sure we had the support, which we obviously did. The only pushback that we got was from the most radical in the other party and our Democrat colleagues. But we did have some colleagues on the other side join us because, again, this is common sense. We've made protecting children a priority. And this is other red states have done the exact same thing. As you said, there's 25 that have done that now. And as we continue to have these destructive and adversarial policies come out of Washington and come from the left, red states, conservative states have to continue to firewall ourselves and protect the people of our states from such destructive policies and these radical agendas that are being pushed by the left.
Well, Representative Zachary, what was, I don't say unique, but it was somewhat unique about your state is that the leadership pushed this. The leadership was all in on this. You've got a great governor. Governor Lee's doing a great job. Your attorney general says, hey, I welcome the fight. We will defend this. It sounds like everybody there in Tennessee is on board in protecting this law so that you can protect children.
That's right. You're exactly right, Tony. And Tony, it makes a difference. Even under Governor Haslam, who was the predecessor to Governor Lee, Governor Haslam loved the Lord. He was a Christ follower. It's easy to play the God card in the South. I represent Tennessee. We're in the buckle of the Bible Belt. But man, Governor Lee loves Jesus. Our majority leader, William Lambert, we prayed yesterday we got on a call yesterday and prayed yesterday for our AG. I serve with some people who love the Lord, and this is a calling for us to serve in the state legislature. And so I know some of the other states that we've talked to, it's kind of the same thing. So it makes a difference when you're working for an audience of one and you're not worried about what the blowback will be. And we really did have a cohesive, unified effort from our caucus. But again, it was led by leadership. Speaker Sexton, who's our speaker, is typically considered one of the most conservative speakers in the country. We tackle these tough social issues that even some red states don't like to tackle. But in Tennessee, we like to go back and forth with Governor DeSantis that sometimes we beat him and sometimes he beats us. But these are steps that we're always going to take to protect children. And again, just from a believer's perspective, because again, that's the way I'm always going to operate. We recognize as believers the enemy is looking to steal, kill, and destroy, John 10:10. And so we have to do all we can to take the necessary steps to protect our most vulnerable, because the enemy's always going to keep coming. Again, we're winning on the issue of life in Tennessee. We're winning now protecting children from these terrible, horrible procedures. And we're just going to keep moving forward, again, because it's the right thing to do and because, again, we're working for an audience of one.
Well, Representative Zachary, you bring up some other great issues I wish we had time to talk about, and that is believers getting in the arena. I testified back when I was in the Louisiana legislature in Tennessee 20-plus years ago. Like Louisiana, Tennessee has changed. It's become a much redder state and that comes with godly leadership willing to step into the arena. So it's encouraging to hear, it's encouraging to see, and I want to thank you for joining us today, and thanks for your leadership there in Tennessee.
Thank you, and I would encourage your audience to pray for our AG as he prepares to defend our state and really take a step for all states for protecting children.
Absolutely, and we certainly will be following up on this as it develops further into the fall. Representative Zachary, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Tony.
So that will be heard sometime in October rather. They'll have the oral argument. So I'm sure we'll be talking with the Attorney General there in Tennessee as we draw closer. All right, don't go away. When we come back, my friend Ralph Reed joins us to talk about what former President Donald Trump had to say at their gathering here in Washington, D.C. over the weekend. That's coming up next as we continue this edition of Washington Watch.
Everything we do begins as an idea. Before there can be acts of courage, there must be the belief that some things are worth sacrificing for. Before there can be marriage, there is the idea that man should not be alone. Before there was freedom, there was the idea that individuals are created equal. It's true that all ideas have consequences, but we're less aware that all consequences are the fruit of ideas. Before there was murder, there was hate. Before there was a Holocaust, there was the belief by some people that other people are undesirable. Our beliefs determine our behavior, and our beliefs about life's biggest questions determine our worldview. Where did I come from? Who decides what is right and wrong? What happens when I die? Our answers to these questions explain why people see the world so differently. Debates about abortion are really disagreements about where life gets its value. Debates over sexuality and gender and marriage are really disagreements about whether the rules are made by us or for us. What we think of as political debates are often much more than that. They're disagreements about the purpose of our lives and the source of truth. As Christians, our goal must be to think biblically about everything. Our goal is to help you see beyond red and blue, left and right, to see the battle of ideas at the root of it all. Our goal is to equip Christians with a biblical worldview and help them advance and defend the faith in their families, communities, and the public square. Cultural renewal doesn't begin with campaigns and elections. It begins with individuals turning from lies to truth. But that won't happen if people can't recognize a lie and don't believe truth exists. We want to help you see the spiritual war behind the political war, the truth claims behind the press release, and the forest from the trees.
This is Washington Watch. I'm Tony Perkins, your host. Good to have you with us on this Tuesday afternoon. Again, we've got our Defending the Faith teammates standing by to take your call. If you'd like to join with us as we come to the end of the fiscal year, give us a call, 800-225-4008. That's 800-225-4008 to partner with us. And because of a generous challenge match, every dollar you give will be doubled. All right? So have double the impact. Give us a call, 800-225-4008. Last Saturday, as I mentioned, former President Donald Trump told an audience of conservative Christians that our republic depends on Christians continuing to leave the sidelines to participate in our republic. Speaking at the Faith and Freedom Coalition's annual Road to the Majority Conference in Washington, right here, former President Trump noted that many Christians do not vote and urged those attending to encourage Christian friends and neighbors to head to the polls in November. Now, given the Biden administration's pattern of targeting Christians, from the FBI investigating Catholic churches to raiding the homes of pro-life activists, will we see engaged conservative Christians responding by voting this fall? Joining me now to discuss this, Dr. Ralph Reed, founder and chairman of the Faith and Freedom Coalition, which organized the Road to Majority Conference. Ralph, welcome back to the program.
Thanks, Tony. Always good to be with you.
So that's music to your ears, engagement of Christians. That's what you've spent most of your adult life, educating and engaging Christians. What's your sense, based upon what you saw this weekend and how folks responded to former President Trump?
I think, Tony, we're going to see a massive turnout of evangelical and pro-life Christians. You know, Donald Trump is a turnout machine, frankly, to some extent on both sides of the ball. But if you go back to 2016, evangelicals were 26% of the electorate, and they voted 81% for Donald Trump. That was the highest share ever recorded by a Republican nominee for president since exit polling began. And in 2020, they increased to 27% of the electorate, and they voted 84% for Donald Trump. So he gained about 2 points on the national ballot. And the raw number of evangelical votes that he got, Tony, was even more impressive. He went from about 25 million evangelical votes to north of 36 million, gained about 11 million net votes. from evangelicals. I'm not a prophet. I can't predict what the turnout will be in November, but it would not surprise me if it was north of that number.
Of course, that was driven by the policies of the Trump administration, 4 years of pro-family policies, pro-life policies. I mean, I'm not taking away from any of the others, although I'm not hesitant to do so. He was one of the few who followed through on promises that he made to evangelical voters, was he not?
Tony, I think if anything, that's an understatement. I mean, you couldn't be more right, but I want you to think, your audience to think about this for a minute. He was the first nominee of a major political party with a vacancy on the Supreme Court on Election Day that released a list of names of jurists and said, I promise to pick a Supreme Court justice from this list and any subsequent vacancy from that list. Tony, that had never happened before in American history.
Right.
And he not only did it once, he did it twice, he did it 3 times. And, I remember, Tony, when he made that promise, there was a Christian blogger, I won't mention his name, he's a good friend of yours and mine, and he said, if his wives couldn't trust him, neither can the voters. The argument was, we can't believe what he says. But to your point, he not only kept that promise, he kept the promise to move the embassy of the U.S. government from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. He kept a promise to defund Planned Parenthood. And then he started keeping promises he never made, like being the first president to ever address the March for Life in person. So you're right. There was no more doubt, no more skepticism, no more mistrust. And I don't think at least I hope there won't be this time.
I want to go back to 2016. In some ways, it's somewhat similar to 2016. We've had a lot of things happen in the 4 years since President Trump left office. But you mentioned there were 3 things I thought were pivotal in 2016 that galvanized evangelical support. And you mentioned the one, releasing of a letter of the list of pro-life nominees that he would make to the courts. We just asked that he do that. He listed he released a list. He picked a known conservative running mate with a record, and then he embraced the most conservative party platform in the party's history. Those 3 things, I think, galvanized support. Do we need a repeat of that?
I think we absolutely need a repeat. I think we're at an inflection point in this campaign, Tony, and in many ways, the foundation for the fall is going to be laid in the next 3 weeks. We have a debate taking place here in Atlanta, where I live and where I'm joining you from tonight, in about 48 hours. And how well the president does, meaning former President Trump, and how well Biden does is going to determine a lot. It'll be a key moment. The second is the selection of his vice presidential running mate. And the third will be the gathering in Milwaukee and the adoption of the platform. And I've said repeatedly, I don't want to speak for you, but I know that you've said similar things, that if the Republican Party and the Trump campaign send a message of equivocation or retreat on the historic defense of innocent human life by the Republican Party, I believe, Tony, the most important position of this party, other than its opposition to slavery, it will make it harder to turn these voters out in the fall.
I think you're right. Dr. Reed, we got to leave it there. Thanks for joining us today. Always great to see you. Stick with us, folks. We're back after this.
America was a bright light until the culture gave into darkness. But we won't. We're in a battle for the soul of our nation, between right and wrong, between truth and lies. At a time when the mainstream media is blocking Americans from truth, millions are searching for a source of trustworthy news that shines a light in the darkness. At this time of great need, FRC is lighting the way forward. For 40 years, Family Research Council and its partners have stood together to advance and defend biblical truth in government and culture. Between our flagship broadcast program, Washington Watch with Tony Perkins, to our news outlet, The Washington Stand, FRC is providing believers across the country with news they can trust from a biblical worldview. When you stand with FRC, You help light the way forward for America and the next generation. Go to frc.org/give.
Jesus said in John 15, "These things I've spoken to you, that my joy may remain in you, and that your joy may be full." In 2024, in these divided and uncertain times, how can this be possible? By abiding in Him through His Word. At Family Research Council, we want to help you do that, which is the reason for the Stand on the Word Bible reading plan. In just 10 to 15 minutes each day, you will have read the entire Bible in just 2 years. But more importantly, you will be abiding in Him daily. Find our Bible reading plan at frc.org/Bible. And join Tony Perkins each weekday for a 10-minute devotional inspired by the daily reading and designed to encourage you on this journey through the Bible. Listen on Apple Podcast, Spotify, and YouTube. And remember, the grass withers and the flower fades, but the word of our God will stand forever.
Research has found that there are 59 million American adults who are a lot like you. There are millions of people around the country who are born again, deeply committed to practicing their faith, and believe the Bible is the reliable Word of God. But that's not all. They're also engaged in our government. They're voters. They're more likely to be involved in their community, and they're making a difference in elections. The problem is that a lot of them feel alone too. We want to change that. FRC wants to connect these 59 million Americans to speak the truth together, no matter the cost. If you want to learn more about this group and what it means to be a spiritually active, governance-engaged conservative, or if you want to find out if you are one of these sage cons yourself, join us. Go to frc.org/SAGECON, SageCon, to learn more. That's SAGECON, SageCon, to learn more.
We were squeezing every second out of that last segment with Ralph Reed. So if you would like to help us, as we're talking about the platform coming up in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, beginning on July the 7th, it'll be the 8th and 9th, be the major days. If you'd like to help us defend the sanctity of human life, the family, and religious freedom, text LIFE to 67742. That's LIFE to 67742, and you'll get a link. All right, our word for today comes from 1 Chronicles chapter 27, where David, trusting in his own strength rather than trusting in God, takes a census of Israel's warriors. Verse 7, "And God was displeased with this thing, therefore he struck Israel. So the Lord sent a plague upon Israel, and 70,000 men of Israel fell." 70,000 men died because of David's sin. Now, this should be more than enough motivation for us to pray for our leaders, because we all pay the price for their sinful decisions, which I think we're seeing even now in our nation. This is why Paul gave these instructions to Timothy in 1 Timothy chapter 2. "Therefore I exhort, first of all, that supplications, prayers, and intercessions, and giving of thanks be made for all men, for kings and all who are in authority, that," listen to this, "that we may lead a quiet and peaceable life in all godliness and reverence." You see, our prayers can move the hand of God, which directs the hearts of kings. To find out more about our journey through the Bible, text Bible to 67742. This Thursday night, we'll see the first round of a rematch 4 years in the making, when former President Donald Trump and President Joe Biden take the stage of a CNN studio in Atlanta for a scheduled 90-minute debate. Well, we'll see how much of a debate it's going to be, but Thursday's showdown will take place without an audience and before either candidate has formally accepted their party's nomination, a departure from previous election cycles, reflecting the desire of both candidates to face off early. Now, given the stakes of the 2024 election, what should we be watching for on Thursday night? Joining me now to discuss this, Brett O'Donnell, president of O'Donnell & Associates, beginning in 2004 when he was retained by the Bush-Cheney campaign to assist the president in debate preparations for 2004. And that presidential debate, he also consulted on multiple national presidential campaigns. In 2016, helped 7 U.S. Senate candidates to victory to preserve the Republican majority in the Senate. Prior to that, he was the debate coach, a winning debate coach at Liberty University, my alma mater. Brett, welcome back to Washington Watch. Good to see you.
Good to be with you, Tony.
So this is a unique debate, both for happening so early in the cycle and for the rules to which the campaigns have agreed. How should we be looking at Thursday night? How significant of an event is this?
I think it's a fairly significant event because normally the first time we hear the candidates on a national stage framing the race is at the conventions. This debate takes place before the conventions. It's the first public campaign general election event where the mass public will get to see these men stand on the stage together and compare their ideas. I also think it's significant because it's a rematch. You have Joe Biden, who's now the incumbent, where Donald Trump was the incumbent in 2020. And it's a rematch of these two. They don't like each other very much. They have very different ideas. And I think the public will be watching this to see if sparks fly during this debate. So I think it's a fairly substantial event. I think it has the power to change the narrative of the overall campaign tremendously, particularly on how either performs. Does Donald Trump debate like he did in debate 1 of 2020 or debate 2? Does Joe Biden make it through 90 minutes without a significant gaffe, which has an indication of what age might be doing to him in terms of his competence for office? So I think a lot of people will be tuned in, and I think it will have a fairly substantial impact on the race.
Well, I'm going to be tuning in. I want to see and watch. I'm not going to be there. I'm going to be here in D.C. I want to play a clip. I'm going to actually go back to 2016 and play a clip that I think was a galvanizing moment for then Mr. Donald Trump as the nominee. I was there in Las Vegas when he was debating Hillary Clinton, and he put her on the defensive over the issue of abortion. Play clip number 4, please.
Well, I think it's terrible. If you go with what Hillary is saying, in the 9th month, you can take the baby and rip the baby out of the womb of the mother just prior to the birth of the baby. Now, you can say that that's okay, and Hillary can say that that's okay, but it's not okay with me. Because based on what she's saying and based on where she's going and where she's been, you can take the baby and baby out of the womb in the 9th month on the final day, and that's not acceptable.
I mean, that was, as I said, a galvanizing moment where people thought, pro-lifers, I think that's where, in my view, he locked down their votes.
Yeah, I think so. A lot of folks had question marks about just how friendly Donald Trump would be to the pro-life movement. He released a list of judges that he would consider for Supreme Court picks. We now know that he picked from that list. They turned out to be very good, strong constitutionalist judges. That led to the overturning of Roe. And in 2016, folks wanted to learn about his conservative bona fides, and that answer epitomized that. And that remains our argument to this day. The pro-life movement is certainly wed to the idea that we need to stop abortions, but particularly late-term abortions, which are particularly egregious.
So I know you're not a pollster, you're a debate coach, but I actually thought he was really good. That was just him in that clip. I mean, that was him speaking basically from his own language. Has that box been checked and he can move on, or does he still have to show that contrast with Biden and his policies on a host of issues? Because the gap between the two parties has only widened in the last 4 years.
Particularly on the life issue, that's true. I think the landscape has changed now because of the Dobbs decision and overruling Roe. So I think folks want to see, now that Roe has been overturned, what does a Republican president do in that atmosphere. It seems that Donald Trump wants to defer to the states, but still remains committed to making sure that Democrats at the federal level don't federalize abortion on demand up until the minute before a baby's born or even the minute after at taxpayer expense. And that's something we need to make sure that we're standing up to. And I think voters still want to hear their prospective candidate say that. So I do think that the landscape has changed some. This is definitely an issue that's going to get debated because I think Democrats feel like they have a good deal of offense they can generate because of the space being opened up by the overturning of Roe. And so I predict whether or not the box has been checked, it'll get discussed in the debate.
All right, Coach. So let me ask you this question: Is offense the best? I mean, in that clip I played, he was on the offense. He was putting Hillary Clinton on the defense in the 2022 midterm elections after the overturn of Roe v. Wade. Republicans were on the defense because they weren't talking about the sanctity of human life and what this next chapter in life looked like. So as Donald Trump goes into this debate on Thursday night with Joe Biden, does he need to be on the offense?
He does in every way. And there's a lot of offense for him to generate, whether it's the economy, immigration, or even on the life issue, because to this day, Democrats continue to try and pass a law that would legalize abortion on demand up until the minute before a baby's born at taxpayer expense. And that is not popular. I'm not a pollster, but I've seen data. And I know for a fact that that position is unpopular with a majority, probably greater than 90% of the American public is against late-term abortion. And most of the public doesn't know that that is the position of the Democrats. In the House and the Senate, virtually no Democrats voted against the bill legalizing abortion up until the minute before a baby's born at taxpayer expense. And so, yes, Trump should be on offense on that issue as well as all of the other issues, whether it's the economy, energy, immigration, crime, so many different things where the public en masse believes Joe Biden has been a complete failure.
Well, Brett O'Donnell, in 2020, if you recall, I know that's a long time ago for people to remember, but Joe Biden was the moderate. Remember, he was going to be the middle of the road Democrat compared to some of the radicals that were running in the Democratic primary. So Donald Trump was having to take on someone who had been vice president, had been a senator, had never really had to own up to a lot of these policies. In fact, when he used to be for the Hyde Amendment. That is, Joe Biden used to be for it. So I would say, you say things have changed. I think the landscape would change where Joe Biden is no longer the moderate. He's no longer the middle of the road guy. He has a long stream of radical policies that he has pushed forward in the last 3.5 years. Absolutely. Joe Biden has been taken hostage by the radical left of his party. And so, Joe Biden isn't a moderate. There aren't any moderate Democrats. There are just liberals and liberals in the Democrat Party. Joe Biden is a liberal. And he's been taken hostage by the liberals, the extreme liberals of his party, and to the point where he is radically extreme, whether it's on the transgender rights issue, boys playing girls' sports, the redefinition of Title IX, an open border, a taxpayer funding of abortion. It doesn't matter what issue you look at. Joe Biden is a radical leftist liberal who is behind policies that have completely failed America and are ripping our country apart, whether it's defunding the police, supporting some of the radical protests that occurred in 2020, or now coddling pro-Hamas anti-Semitic protesters
like he did with the protesters in LA. Instead of standing up to them, telling them that the Department of Justice would be coming for them, he sends out this mild-mannered tweet so he doesn't offend the pro-Hamas Palestinian protesters that he needs, or he thinks he needs, to win this election. Joe Biden isn't concerned about a two-state solution in the Middle East. He's concerned about the two states of Minnesota and Michigan. Those are the states he cares about.
Should Donald Trump then really zero in on those radical positions that Joe Biden has taken, contrasting that with himself on the other side?
Absolutely, because none of those positions are popular with the American public. We know that the majority of people in this country are not anti-Semitic. The majority of people in this country do not sympathize with terrorists. The majority of people in this country believe in restrained government spending and lower taxes. The majority of people in this country don't believe they should have to scrap their gas stove or their gas-burning car. The majority of people in this country don't believe in late-term abortion. A majority of people in this country believe that girls should get to play girl sports and boys should play boy sports. That's where a majority of the country is. Joe Biden is out of step. That's why he's doing so miserably in many of the polls.
So, Brett, what should be, if you were consulting President Trump in this particular debate, what would you how would you recommend to him? What would you coach him? How would you coach him to start that debate coming out of the chute?
So stylistically, he should be aggressive, but not offensive. If he were to debate like he did in the second debate of 2020, I think the Trump campaign would feel like they had a pretty good night. He should make this race a referendum on Joe Biden's failed policies, because Joe Biden's going to have a hard time defending any one of his policies, whether it's economic policy, social policy, the world, foreign policy, any of those policies. He's going to have a very tough time defending those policies. Donald Trump should make this, and he should litigate the case against Joe Biden on a policy level to show just how miserably Joe Biden's policies have failed, and then present the solutions that he would bring in, mainly a return to lots of the Trump policies from 2016 to 2020 that had the country much more prosperous, energy independent, peace across the globe, a friend of Israel, and protecting life. If he does that, if he does that work in the debate, he's going to have a successful night. If it becomes personal and they are attacking each other, voters at home are going to say, you're more concerned about each other than you are me. And right now, I have a lot of problems that I'm facing that I need solutions for.
Yeah.
Donald Trump has to make this debate about them.
It's going to be very interesting to watch. Brett O'Donnell, always good to see you. Thanks so much for taking time to join us tonight.
Very welcome. Good to be with you, Tony.
All right, Brett O'Donnell. All right, folks, out of time for today, but still have folks standing by that can take your call, 800-225-4008. Also, join me in defending life. Text LIFE to 67742. Until next time, I leave you with the encouraging words the Apostle Paul found in Ephesians 6, where he says, when you've done everything you can do, when you've prayed, when you've prepared, and when you've taken your stand, by all means, keep standing.
Washington Watch with Tony Perkins is brought to you by Family Research Council and is entirely listener-supported. Portions of the show discussing candidates are brought to you by Family Research Council Action. For more information on anything you heard today, or to find out how you can partner with us in our ongoing efforts to promote faith, family, and freedom, visit TonyPerkins.com.